Everyone. Welcome to this third in the series of the CAPS meet. And the topic today is e-transposition of great arteries. And as already introduced, we have Professor Anita Saxena Madam, Professor Josna Madam, and even expert comments from Vijay Lakshmi Ma'am. So shall we go on to the clinical history of the patient? Yes. So this is a 3-year-old male child who was diagnosed to have a heart disease at birth when he was noted to have cyanosis. Later, at the age of 2 to 3 months, he developed feeding difficulties, shortness of breath, which was relieved by medication. Since then, he has been having shortness of breath and intermittent severe cyanosis. There is no history of cyanotic spells, no squatting episodes. The child was born out of non-consanguineous marriage, and no other member in the family had a history of heart disease. So taking the clinical history into account, the positive features in this are the cyanosis which was present at birth, which possibly had increased progressively because he had mild cyanosis at birth and later it went on to intermittent severe cyanosis. And later he developed signs suggestive of congestive heart failure. So I would request Dr. Anita Saxena Madam to take ahead with the history and her comments on the history.
Okay, so this is a child who is now 3 years old but had history of cyanosis right at birth, or at least have a history of heart disease and history of mild cyanosis, which has probably increased over a period of time. So the first question is that what are the causes of cyanosis at birth, or let's say within 24 to 48 hours of life? So obviously we have to think of more serious cyanotic heart diseases whenever we have a neonate with cyanosis. And the commonest cause of cyanosis at birth would be transposition of great arteries. As the babies become bigger, or if you have cyanosis starting at 6 months or 3 months, then you have to start thinking about tetralogy of Fallot's, which becomes the commonest disease. But if you have history of cyanosis at birth, then again, as we discussed last time also, it has to be transposition or pulmonary atresia, where also you will have cyanosis at birth, but not tetralogy. The second thing is, at the age of 2 to 3 months, it seems that this baby has developed some features suggestive of heart failure, because there is shortness of breath, there is feeding difficulty, and some medications have helped him to get better. So again, I think we again have to go towards the group of cyanosis with increased pulmonary blood flow. That means again we are going away from tetralogy of Fallot's group, because tetralogy of Fallot's patients should not have features of congestive heart failure like feeding difficulties, shortness of breath. One history that I would like to get, which is missing over here, is the history of failure to thrive, whether the weight gain was optimal or not. If there is history of failure to thrive, then again it goes more in favor of heart failure and therefore cyanotic congenital heart disease with increased pulmonary blood flow. Shortness of breath, yes, that could be part of heart failure. That could also be because of cyanosis. And as the child gets bigger and starts walking, then you know that shortness of breath becomes worse and worse. There is no history of cyanotic spell. Again, if there was a history of cyanotic spell, you would think about tetralogy, but having no history of cyanotic spell doesn't really mean much. But yes, it is something that we don't see in increased pulmonary blood flow through squatting or cyanotic spells. And the other history that I would like to know is about, as I said, about failure to thrive, what is the weight gain, and if there is any history of syncope or seizure or unconsciousness. I think that is another history we must be asking whenever we get a patient with cyanotic heart disease.
History of failure to thrive was present, no history of any syncopal attacks. And this history of cyanosis was mentioned by the attendants. Whether they noticed this or the physician noticed this, we are not sure of that.
We're not sure. But even if it is not by anybody noticed at birth or within soon after birth, I think we have to think about conditions which produce cyanosis at birth. And last time also we discussed why is tetralogy of Fallot's is usually not cyanosis at birth. So we have to think of pulmonary atresia and transposition. But with the history of heart failure, we should tilt towards increased pulmonary blood flow situation, and one being transposition of great arteries. I think the other question is why transposition, why not other increased pulmonary blood flow conditions like truncus arteriosus, like PORV with no pulmonary stenosis, TAPVC, and and like the whole group that we talk about. I think all these conditions other than transposition usually do not present with cyanosis at birth. For example, truncus arteriosus is very unlikely to be cyanosed at birth. Usually their saturations will be more than 92% or 90%. Therefore, to discern cyanosis will be very difficult. Unless it's an obstructed TAPVC, even TAPVCs with large flow, unobstructed, may not be blue or very minimally blue, which is picked up only by pulse oximetry and not by the parents or even by the doctor at the bedside. Double outlet right ventricle again behaves very much like a large VSD only, and therefore you may have features of heart failure in all of them, but history of cyanosis is going to be cyanosis usually develops a little later rather than present at birth. So by this history, I'm going to think about transposition as number one diagnosis. But yes, you have to keep the whole group in mind, which consists of truncus arteriosus, unobstructed TAPVC, double outlet right ventricle, single ventricle, and so on. I think we can enumerate those causes later.
Any comments from Joseph, madam?
Yeah, that's what, as madam already said, it should be increased pulmonary blood flow, like AV canal defects associated with syndromic in associations. So those people also can have the increased pulmonary blood flow with the cyanosis. All those conditions can be considered. As other possibilities I thought of is all admixture physiosis, like a single ventricle, DORV without an obstructions, and the truncus. And male preponderance is seen preferentially in the DTGA conditions than when compared to the other admixture physiologies. And of course here, if once we think of in a DTGA, few of the antenatal history of the mother having a diabetes or taking the vitamin A may be helpful to give a clue to them. And most of these children are a little bit overweight at the time of the birth. So birth history little bit more maybe give a clue.
Suppose we think this is a transposition. So do all patients present with mild cyanosis, severe cyanosis? How is the presentation in case of transposition?
Please. No, please go ahead, madam.
So all cases of transposition will not present with cyanosis. It depends whether we are dealing with transposition of great arteries with no VST and no sizable PDA. Usually we call it TGIBF. That means transposition of great arteries intact ventricular septum. These are the patients who predominantly present with cyanosis right at birth or within a couple of days of birth, within a day or two of birth when the PDA starts to close. But those who have a large VST will again present more like a failure and less of cyanosis. So therefore, if you have somebody having cyanosis at birth, you can think about transposition. And if you want to be more accurate, then maybe transposition with intact ventricular septum. But remember, even transposition with BSD can also present with cyanosis at birth. Transposition PDA can also present with cyanosis at birth. But generally, it is the intact septum patients who are much more blue than those who have a VSD.
The fact that this child was detected with cyanosis at birth and he survived up to 3 years indicates that he had significant intracardiac shunting. So unlikely to have an intact ventricular septum.
I wouldn't agree with that because a large ASD is the best mixing site for them. In fact, patients who survive beyond the first year of life of transposition are the ones who have a large ASD, because ASD provides the best mixing in these patients. PD and VSD are not such good mixing sites, and because of the parallel circulation, you really require a good mixing in these patients. And I think ASD, so if the patient has survived to 3 years, I would think more in terms of a large ASD with intact ventricular septum, because generally patients who have a VSD will go into really bad failure, and their survival is much worse. Of course, any TGA survival is bad, but those with VSD tend to be more in failure. Those with intact septum tend to be more blue. And therefore, those who have a large ASD probably have better chances of survival.
Yeah, if you see the physiology of the DTGA immediately after the birth, the major thing is the PFO presence and the PDA, which is normally present, and it takes sometimes a few hours for the closure. So if that sudden deepening of the cyanosis occurs after the few hours, just because of this closure of this PDA, which causes the more increased blood flow to the left atrium, and that causes the left atrium, that also causes the increase in the left atrial pressure and the closure of the PFO, then the worsening of the cyanosis occurs. Then it is more likely a classical feature of the subject intermittent. Always we may be able to get that type of history.
Do we have any comments from Vijay Lakshmi ma'am?
I don't see her sitting there.
Okay. Shall we go to the clinical examination?
I think there's one more question that you have that has been sent to me. Can it be obstructive lesion like hypoplastic left heart?
Yes.
I think we should not consider those lesions in somebody who has survived to 3 years of age without any intervention, because they have very high mortality. And I would not like to keep the possibility of either severe coarctation or hypoplastic left ventricle or interrupted aortic arch. I mean, there could be rare survivors, but for example, interrupted aortic arch by itself will not produce cyanosis in the upper limb at birth. So therefore, you have to rule that out. Similarly, hypoplastic left heart syndrome hardly ever survive beyond the first week of life without intervention. So I think those conditions where there is obstructive left heart disease have to be ruled out or not considered in such a child.
There are few questions in the chat group regarding the history and all. This is to mention that we have mentioned only the positive history, a brief history, because this is only a CAPMET, not a bedside. So this patient does not, we have not given any history of stroke, polycythemia, or any complications which were not mentioned by the attendant.
And one more thing is, history of the stroke is very important, as already Anita madam mentioned. But a polycythemia, even though the clinic, you can detect it by the examination wise and the lab parameters wise, but clinically to manifest, that is in headaches and all other features, are usually not very common at the age group of 3 years. So as they become much more older, then all the signs of the polycythemia clinically we may able to get the history.
The neurological complications can be seen in this age group, right? It could be a CVA,
yeah.
I mean, depending on the age group, or a brain abscess.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, definitely. But I think at 3 years, I would be more worried about anemia rather than polycythemia, because they really need a high hemoglobin, and even a hemoglobin of 12 or 13 may be actually anemia for them. But polycythemia is something that's seen in older children and adults with cyanotic heart disease.
Okay. So coming to the examination, weight of 12 kg, height of 102 centimeters, mild cyanosis noted, no anemia, no jaundice, no clubbing, clubbing present, no lymphadenopathy, no pedal edema. The vitals, blood pressure of 90/50, pulse rate of 126 per minute, regular normal volume, and no specific character. Respiratory rate of 32 per minute, febrile. Coming to the cardiovascular examination, JVP is normal. The apex is RV type. Grade 2 parasternal heave is present, palpable second heart sound, no thrills were palpated. On auscultation, first heart sound is normal, second heart sound is single, no additional sound. A 3/6 pansystolic murmur, most prominent in the third and fourth left intercostal space, a high pitch with no variation with respiration was seen, and no other murmurs were heard. So this is the general examination where we see a normal JVP, normal pulse, and RV apex with grade 2 parasternal pulsation, single first and heart sound, and the only auscultatory finding was significant finding was a single second heart sound and a 3/6 pansystolic murmur. So, does this feature fit in case of transposition, or do they suggest something?
So I think the odd point is mild cyanosis. I would expect this patient to be significantly blue, because she's 3 years, and by this time the cyanosis should have really become, or should have become much more deeper. So having mild cyanosis is a bit unusual, and therefore I will think about anemia, because anemia can sometimes mask cyanosis, and one should not say no anemia in a cyanotic child, because it's very difficult to diagnose anemia in the presence of cyanosis. So that is a little odd point. Also, her weight is not too bad. 12 kg, which is again something I would have expected it to be much less than 12 kg, because she would have heart failure to thrive, and heart failure at least in infancy. Of course, clubbing is there, which is expected to be there. The respiratory rate is little on the higher side, 32 per minute, but there seems to be no respiratory distress from what I can see, and there is some amount of tachycardia for a 3-year-old. 126 is on the higher side. JVP is not elevated at this point, so she's not in failure. Apex is RV type. We expect RV apex in conditions where there is RV hypertrophy and there is grade 2 parasternal heave, again suggesting that there is significant right ventricular hypertrophy. Second heart sound is, there is no thread. Second heart sound is single because we are hearing probably only one component, or if there are two components, they are all both together. There are no third heart sound, fourth heart sound. I think what is striking here is a 3/6 pan-systolic murmur, which is best heard in the third and fourth left intercostal space. It seems to be coming from the tricuspid valve because the location is that of a tricuspid valve. However, it does not show any variation with respiration. So I would put it as a TR murmur because firstly, it is pan-systolic and not ejection systolic. Secondly, it is lower down, third and fourth intercostal space. Therefore, it cannot be murmur of pulmonary stenosis because that's the other murmur that can come up in these patients. Not in these patients, but in cyanotic patients. So if you have such a loud murmur in somebody, in fact, you have to think about conditions with pulmonary stenosis because such loud murmurs are very unusual in cyanotic with increased pulmonary blood flow. But I think here this murmur is more like a tricuspid regurgitation murmur, suggesting that right ventricle is not just hypertrophic, it is dilated and maybe it is dysfunctional because there is so much of tricuspid regurgitation. So I would interpret it as a TR murmur. It's a little odd finding for a classical TGA because generally TGAs are murmurless. They have no murmurs. So, but I think in the context of this particular patient, we should not go away from TGA and therefore think of it as a TR murmur.
In case of TGA, what murmurs do you expect there?
So in case of TGA, actually we don't expect any murmur. Generally, the first heart sound is normal, second is single, and there would be some grade 2 heave because of right ventricular hypertrophy. The apex may be a little shifted out because of right ventricular dilatation, but generally you don't expect any murmur. Murmur in a TGA would always mean that some complication has happened.
Yes, ma'am.
Considering about the TR murmur, as madam has said, in the, if at all we think of a transposition physiology, in a 1/3 of the cases, tricuspid abnormalities are known to occur. And the tricuspid abnormalities more frequently it is because of the existing the VSD closure because of the prolapse of the tricuspid valve tissue, or it may be because of the cleft, or there are the multiple causes for the tricuspid regurgitation in the case of the transposition. That is one possibility. In 30% of the cases, we can see the tricuspid valve involvement is much more frequent than a mitral valve involvement. That is about only 20%. And one more thing I wanted to bring a point is, even though it is not a classical VSD murmurs description and the PS murmur description, classically we say that VSD murmurs are pansystolic and whereas the RVOT murmurs, that is the pulmonary stenosis murmurs, are only ejection quality. Most of the time it fits very well. But the exceptions occur like the DORV, the VSD murmur is like an ejection because it is for LV can regress only through that VSD. So it is almost like a LVOT murmur. So we can hear the VSD murmur there is like a ejection quality. So another possibility which I wanted to bring at this other than the TR murmur is VSD. What is the objections for you, madam, to consider the VSD?
Okay, so if we say VSD murmur in a TGA, we are expecting, unless the VSD is very small, then there will be a gradient between right ventricle and left ventricle, and then you can have a gradient giving you a systolic murmur of VSD because there is a right to left shunt across VSD, not left to right. Generally, if this patient has a larger VSD, then the VSD will not produce any murmur because of the equalization of pressures in the right and the left ventricle. So I think only small VSD, which is producing a gradient between right ventricle and left ventricle, can produce a systolic murmur. But in the situation in which we are in, since we are thinking about transposition of great arteries, I would think more in terms of TR because we know by about 3 years, 4 years of age, the right ventricle may start to get dilated in a TGA because of the systemic pressure it is faced with for a long time, and tricuspid regurgitation may occur, or TR may be because of the abnormality of the tricuspid valve, which you just mentioned, which is more of an echocardiographic and a surgical finding really. But I would place is more like a TR murmur rather than a VST murmur in a patient of transposition.
There are many questions on this with a JVP normal, no V wave present, and no respiratory variation. Should we still consider it as a TR murmur, or should we be in favor of a VSD murmur here?
So I think JVP normal means JVP is not elevated. It doesn't say whether the V waves are normal or not. Firstly, even if V waves are normal, you can have a TR murmur. I think one needs to realize that this is a murmur which is happening on the systemic ventricle. So therefore, it is almost like an MR murmur, and therefore murmur may be very prominent despite JVP being normal, because like in an MR patient, you don't necessarily get high LA pressure with a severe or significant MR. Similarly here, because it is connected, the RV is connected to aorta, so the typical features of TR may actually be absent in patients of transposition where the right ventricle is connected to aorta and not pulmonary artery.
Respiratory variation needn't be seen in these cases, even if it's TR?
Respiratory variation should be seen. The only thing is, if there is a large ASD, that can take away the respiratory variation.
Okay. So what is important here is, even if the JVP is normal, we need to see whether a V wave is prominent.
Yes.
And second thing is, absence of a respiratory variation does not rule out the presence of a TR. It can still be a TR.
Yes, I think having a penisystolic murmur at lower left sternal border, you're left with just 2 or 3 possibilities. One is a VSD, other is a TR. MR can rarely come here in cases of CTGA, not in TGA, but in corrective transposition where there is a rotation of the heart. But here, because of the fact that this patient is 3 years and we are thinking more in terms of TGA, intact ventricular septum, and a small VSD will be very unusual. I mean, it can be there, but a little unusual in this patient. Therefore, the first diagnosis I'm going to put is TR and the second as a small VSD.
Just for the completion's sake, I wanted to mention about another features, as I already mentioned, madam, in the clinical history wise. Like a CTGA, if MR murmur is thought of, previously was mentioned that the pulse rate may be at the lower rate because complete heart blocks may be associated. If it is in a truncus, then more likely we will have, if at all truncal wall regurgitation, we may have an additional murmur of the truncal wall regurgitation. And if it is a DORV, which we thought of in the clinically in the beginning, all admixture physiologists has to be the ruled out. In the DORV, usually the A wave will be prominent. By the age of the 3 years, we can make it out the JVP very well. So we expect that A wave to be the very prominently the same. And if it is associated in the DORV, the most frequently the transposition physiologies are the more frequent, that is L-mal post and the D-mal post. After that, L-mal post is slightly more frequent. So we may able to see the more pulsations are present on the second and the third intercostal spaces. And these are the few clues to exclude the other conditions. Of course, for the single ventricle, we may not have, again, the presence of the L-mal post aorta and the pulsations may be the helpful to suspect a case of the single ventricle. Because single ventricle of RV morphology, we have to think of not of an LV morphology in this because of effects of an RV type. Then the right ventricle is going to be in a normal position, which is the posterior. So it is even the rudimentary posterior left ventricle doesn't produce any pulsations. Only if it is an inverted right ventricle, then it can have some pulsations on the third intercostal space.
The one more thing that I wanted to mention was about the VSD in a patient of transposition. I think we need to remember that the VSD is actually directed from right ventricle to left ventricle. So it's actually going from anterior to posterior, because RV is anterior, LV is posterior, and therefore a typical murmur of VSD would be very different, and the murmur of VSD would be very different in TGA compared to a classical VSD murmur where you are having left to right shunt. So here the murmur is actually going posteriorly, and you may not detect the VSD murmur in the presence of a transposition of great arteries, unlike other cases, because here it is going right ventricle to left ventricle, anterior to posterior. The direction of the jet is away from your stethoscope.
Yeah, it is frequently mentioned that this goes to the back than to the other areas.
Then these tricuspid abnormalities are seen in any specific subset of TGA, or all subsets of TGA it can be seen?
So, Dr. Jyotsna would like to answer.
The few of the conditions, if you see the causes, if it is a cleft tricuspid leaflet, then there is no variant of the TTGA association. If it is the cause of the TR is because of the prolapse of the tricuspid tissue and the partial closure of the VSD, this is much more frequently causes even the LVOT obstructions in them. So the TGA with an LVOT obstructions with the VSD and the tricuspid tissue prolapse is common in that condition. Or otherwise, if the morphological tricuspid valve abnormalities, there is no preference in any type of the TGA.
Now, clinically, if we think it as a TGA, TGA has 4 subsets. One is with an intact ventricular septum. One is with a VSD with increased pulmonary blood flow. VSD with pulmonary hypertension or pulmonary vascular obstruction, or VSD with PS. So taking the clinical examination in thing, what could be our first possibility among these subsets?
So I'm going to think of transposition with intact ventricular septum as the first possibility. The reason being that the history of cyanosis has been present almost since birth. The second thing is that she has lived up to 3 years of age, and if there is a large ASD, then they can survive. Not all, but some of them can survive. TGA VST will have more failure and will have an early Eisenmenger syndrome. Maybe, I mean, even an intact septum can have, but TGA VSTs are far more prone to Eisenmenger syndrome than a TGA intact ventricular septum. The PDA we can't rule out because we are not hearing any murmur, and we don't expect to hear murmur because the pressures are equal. But the very fact that if I'm calling this as a TR murmur, then I have to stick with TGA intact ventricular septum, because in the presence of VST, the right ventricle is assisted by the left ventricle if there is a large VST or PDA, and the right ventricular failure is much less common in patients of TGA with VST or PDA. However, in those with intact ventricular septum, because right ventricle tends to fail, there is no outlet for the right ventricle or there's no assistant from the left ventricle, the right ventricle failure or right ventricle dilatation at least will give rise to TR. And not necessarily failure, but dilatation of the right ventricle will give rise to TR. So if I'm calling it a TR murmur, I'll stick with TGA, intact ventricular septum with an AST.
When the TR cause you are mentioning as a right ventricular dilatation is responsible. Suppose if the TR is because of this, what I mentioned already, like it is a closure of the VSD and is trying to obstruct the LVOT, then also we can have the TR. So how can we rule it out? Is that the types clinically, can you distinguish it?
I think most of the time the tricuspid valve abnormality that we're talking about is more of an echocardiographic finding. To hear a TR murmur, clinically, to hear a TR murmur will be little unusual. And therefore, if you hear a TR murmur, you must think about RV dilatation in a patient of transposition because of an intact septum. And to get those abnormality tricuspid valve which you mentioned, partially closing the VST or producing LVOT obstructions, are more of echocardiographic findings rather than clinical. Clinically, if I hear a good TR murmur of 3/6, I will think about RV dilatation and TR secondary to RV dilatation.
At the end of examination, the first possibility I think is DTGA, and then the other things which we require to exclude could be DORV with VSD with no PS. Then you have a single ventricle with no PS and truncus. I think there are some things which we require to rule out, though the clinical examination is suggestive of DTGA. That is what you suggest?
Absolutely. I think we cannot be very sure by clinical examination history. We have to think the group. I think we can be reasonably sure of the fact that she belongs to the group of cyanotic heart disease with increased pulmonary blood flow. And it is possible that she had single ventricle. It is possible that she had DORV. And it is also possible that now she has severe pulmonary arterial hypertension, and which is adding on to her cyanosis. So she's getting into Eisenmenger situation, which is adding on to her cyanosis. So we should think about transposition with intact septum transposition with VST, truncus arteriosus, TAPV, even TAPVC we should think about because it's an RV apex, it's a grade 2 parasternal heat. The only point against it that second heart sound is not wide and fixed, which you expect in a TAPVC patient, and truncus arteriosus, etc. also. I think I'm tilting towards TGA intact septum simply because the patient had been known to has been cyanosed almost from the very beginning of her life. Otherwise, so that becomes number one diagnosis, but I would not say that there is no other diagnosis we should entertain. We must entertain the other causes of increased pulmonary blood flow.
Can we go to the next slide, please, for the ECG? So this is the ECG of the patient. Normal sinus rhythm of heart rate of around 110 to 120, and there's a right axis deviation of around 110 to 120 degrees. Right atrial enlargement is there. PR interval is normal, that is RVH, but there is no strain pattern seen. Left LV forces are seen, but not very prominent. So basically what we have here is a right atrial enlargement and right ventricular hypertrophy with no strain pattern, and a right axis deviation of around 110 to 120 with a clockwise loop.
I think another point to be noted is that this is at half standardization.
Yeah.
So we can imagine that the complexes of the right ventricle are really, really tall, because RV complex, if you look at V1, then it is already 13, 14. So it becomes 26. Similarly, S wave in V6 is also tall. So this is really right ventricular hypertrophy. There is no early transition. There is no strain, but the left ventricular forces are not prominent, and there is right axis deviation with right atrial enlargement. So I think simply the ECG fits in with our diagnosis, but then it is not typical of transposition. It is not typical of transposition, and there could be other diagnoses that can be entertained with this ECG, including conditions such as double outlet right ventricle or even truncus arteriosus for that matter. Because at 3 years, you almost always lose left ventricular forces in a truncus or in a DORV, because we know the flow reduces, and therefore the left ventricle volume overload also reduces by about 3 years. If this child was 1 month old, I would not consider truncus. I would not consider single ventricle, because you expect some left ventricular forces to be there. But by age of 3 years, I think this could be the pattern even in other conditions.
Yeah, for the students takes to exclude the other conditions, for the DORV, it is a clockwise route, that is an against of it, and you usually have a strain pattern in a DORV. RVH is a strain, and various other things are PR interval prolongation and S wave slurring. All those things, if they are present, they are in the favor of the DORV. As Madam said, the DTG can go along with the DTGA and the truncus.
What about truncus? On ECG, can we exclude here?
No, that's what Madam already described it. The truncus by the age of the 3 years usually loses the right ventricular, the left ventricular forces. So this can go along with the truncus also. If there is a truncal valve regurgitation, then the development of the left ventricular forces becomes much more prominent. Or otherwise, normally as the age progresses, LV may not show a much of increase in the size. So this can go along with the truncus.
I think if this is a truncus ECG, then it can be very well of truncus, but I think you would then have to think that this patient has gone into Eisenmenger because of truncus, because you don't see LV forces at all over here. So therefore, it can be truncus, but if you are thinking of truncus, think about truncus with severe pulmonary vascular disease. But that is not true for TGA. TGA can exist without significant pulmonary vascular disease with this ECG.
What about single ventricle?
Yes, it can be single ventricle also, because we know that single ventricle can have all kinds of ECG. So I wouldn't say that it is not single ventricle, but this ECG is not showing stereotype complexes, not showing monomorphic complexes, not showing abnormal, unusual axes like the northwest axis, etc. Therefore, it is little unlikely, because single ventricle ECGs are more bizarre and they do not really fit into any specific pattern most of the time. But yes, single ventricle can never, we can never say that no to single ventricle.
Can I speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, in a single ventricle, there is a stereotype of complexes in the chest leads, which is not here. In fact, the left ventricular forces are much less here. And another thing is, in truncus, the large VST is a must, it's an obligatory one. Otherwise, the child cannot survive. So there will be tall R and the deep S wave in the mid chest leads.
Suppose we think this is a classical ECG of right atrial enlargement, RVH without strain, right axis deviation fitting into transposition. What are the variants in the ECG that can be seen in the transposition?
So for transposition, the classical ECG is right axis deviation with right ventricular hypertrophy. If you have a transposition with VSD, with no pulmonary stenosis, then you can have good left ventricular forces also. So if this patient had good left ventricular forces in the ECG, I would think of TGA with the ventricular septal defect, or even a PDA that can give you good left ventricular forces. Sometimes if the VSD is muscular in origin, the axis can become left rather than right. If there is associated, other anomalies, then the ECG can vary with depending upon which anomaly. But having an axis of, let us say, between 0 to plus 90 would be very unusual, or even 110 will be very unusual, unlike tetralogy where the axis usually does not go beyond 110, 120. In a TGA, the axis usually goes much more right, more like 160, 170. Like here also you have an axis of almost 160 or 150. So that kind of extreme right axis deviation is more likely to point towards TGA. But yes, you can have good LV forces if you can have left axis deviation occasionally. If the RV is for some reason smallish, you can have less of RV forces. So there could be a lot of variation, but they can also give you a clue of the underlying association of the TGA.
Any more comments on the ECG, or shall we go to the X-ray? There are few questions, I think. Is it a general ECG of a cyanotic heart disease of RV dominance? I think we have already discussed this. Any comments to be added here?
I think that's a good comment, that if you get right axis deviation, right ventricular hypertrophy, cyanotic heart disease it's not unusual. But I think what we need to see the minor details. For example, right axis deviation of how much? Is it going beyond 120? As I said, if it is too much of right axis deviation, that's against a tetralogy of Fallows and goes more in favor of TGA. If it is axis lying into the northwest axis, then it goes in favor of DORV. So although all these conditions have RAD and RVH, but you should look at the details of this RAD and RVH. How much is the axis? How much is the RVH? Is there any early transition? Are there any LV forces? So those are the little clues which will help you to differentiate various conditions within the cyanotic group.
Next slide, please. This is the X-ray of the child showing situs solitus. There is significant cardiomegaly.
That is my problem, or really everyone is having the difference?
Significant cardiomegaly is there. You have a RA enlargement. And there is an apex, and the superior mediastinum appears normal. There is increased pulmonary vascular margin, and there is some shadow going up into the upper mediastinum.
So this X-ray firstly shows, first thing is that cardiomegaly with increased blood flow immediately takes her to the group that we were talking about. That means cyanotic heart disease with increased pulmonary blood flow. So that part is confirmed, that there is increased pulmonary blood flow and there is cardiomegaly. So that part is confirmed. So the next question is which chambers are enlarged. I think right atrium seems little enlarged. The apex is not typically right ventricle because it is not upturned apex, but yes, it is not definitely left ventricular also. So it could fit in with our diagnosis. It could be an RV or an LV apex or even a biventricular apex. I think the important point over here is that when you have plethora or pulmonary blood flow increase and cardiomegaly, you expect pulmonary artery segment to be prominent. Here, the pulmonary artery segment is not prominent. You don't have any bulge in the pulmonary artery segment. And that is what is making the pedicle to be little narrow. So the pedicle of the heart or the neck of the heart is actually a little narrow, which again favors malposed great arteries. It's not necessarily TGA, but it favors malpose or entero-posterior relationship of great arteries. So pulmonary artery is not in its usual place. So that favors one of the transposition physiology, be it transposition itself, or it could be double outlet right ventricle with transposition or single ventricle with transposition. So any malposition of great arteries can coexist with other cyanotic heart conditions, and therefore that is what favors in this X-ray. The pedicle is narrow. Yes, the right upper shadow is a little prominent, and that could indicate prominence of the superior vena cava, and I think that will correlate pretty well with the finding of tricuspid regurgitation that you had on clinical examination and on ECG, you have right atrial enlargement, you have right atrial enlargement on X-ray also, and therefore we expect venous pressures to be little on the higher side, and that could be possible. That could be the reason for the SVC to be little prominent. Another point that we should probably look for is the periphery of the lung. So periphery of the lung doesn't look too plethoric. And therefore, it is possible that this girl may be having some pulmonary arterial hypertension, but one cannot be very sure about it. Definitely, there is central plethora without prominent pulmonary artery segment. I think that's a very important message, which suggests malposition of the great arteries.
Can I come in? Yeah, classically in TGA, it is described that egg on side or egg on string appearance. Here, the narrow pedicle is there. Though it is narrow, it is looking wide because of the SVC that is coming, the SVC shadow. But otherwise, as Dr. Anita said, because of the malposed anteroposterior position of the great arteries, the pedicle is always narrow. And plethora indicates that there is no stenosis. And that's the reason the cyanosis was much less in the early age. And the failure signs were there.
I think I would like to let the students know that typical egg-on-side appearance is seen in a minority. So if you see it, it's very helpful. But if you don't see it, don't think that, don't disregard TGA. I think having a narrow pedicle is good enough in the presence of cardiomegaly and plethora.
Just I want to mention that DTGA usually it is a narrow pedicle because it is relatively posteriorly present pulmonary artery. But I don't want to confuse the students because it can have the other varieties. Always the aorta need not to be right and anterior. It can be a left and anterior, and very occasionally it can be the side by side also. So always don't think that it is always we should have a narrow pedicle. Narrow pedicle represents that it is a relatively posterior pulmonary artery, not forming the shadow to have the mediastinal one.
I think somebody is asking a question about shadow within a shadow. So the X-ray may suggest that there is a left atrial enlargement within the right atrial enlargement. I think that is probably just an impression. I'm not convinced because whatever little bronchus I can see, although I don't see very clearly, it seems to be quite normal in location and therefore not uplifted. So perhaps it is all right atrial enlargement.
We have considered a few differential diagnoses as other conditions of increased pulmonary blood flow, such as truncus, DORV, single ventricle. Can this X-ray help us to exclude the other conditions in specific?
So I think the only condition I can exclude completely is truncus, because in truncus you tend to have pulmonary arteries coming little from the higher position and not from the hilum, because we know they arise from aorta. So this X-ray is unlike that of truncus arteriosus. It can still be single ventricle in DORV as long as we say that there is malposed great arteries. That means anteroposterior relationship of aorta and pulmonary artery, like in transposition. So you cannot rule it out by just an X-ray. X-ray is suggesting large flow, cardiomegaly, and malposed great arteries. Whether the condition is single ventricle or double outlet right ventricle or TGA, it will not differentiate. ECG will perhaps help you better for that. But yes, truncus usually doesn't give this kind of an X-ray. And TA-PVC supracardiac is also unlikely.
Does the eye arch sidenesses suggest us any specific diagnosis?
If you have a right-sided aortic arch, you can think about truncus. But I think all the other conditions usually do not give you high, when their right-sided aortic arch is much less common. So that can help you. But here I don't see. I think it's a left arch. Whatever indentation I can see is on the left side. Yeah.
In the left appendage abnormalities, which is commonly seen in transposition, can we detect it on the X-ray or something?
will be very difficult because left atrial appendage only forms the border, left border of the heart. It will be tough to see it on the X-ray.
Juxtaposition cannot be, cannot be detected by a bulge or anything, and it cannot be picked up on the X-ray.
Actually, juxtaposition is absence of a bulge. It goes inside the heart. So it will be hard to differentiate, to make that diagnosis. Like in tricuspid atresia, typically you see the right atrium missing. So the juxtaposition actually makes the appendage go inside the heart. So it will be not a bulge, it will be actually a negative shadow.
Right atrial appendage if it is juxtaposition is seen, then we see the straightening of the right heart border, and usually this goes, as madam said, into the heart. But one I read as one of the causes for the slight bulge in the infundibular area is also can be happen in the juxtaposition. I think madam can clarify that.
Unless the appendage is enlarged for some reason, juxtaposed appendage is enlarged for some reason, you will not be seeing a bulge.
Can we go to the 2D echo? Next slide, please. A brief echo report that is showing a situs solitus, levocardia, D-loop ventricle, AV concordance, VA discordance, pulmonary artery arising from the LV, aorta from the RV, a normal systemic and pulmonary venous drainage, OS-ASD of 2.7 cm with bidirectional shunt, a small perimembranous VSD with bidirectional shunt, no coarctation, no PDA, aorta is to the right and anterior of pulmonary artery, RA-RV dilated with mild TR, a D-shaped L ventricle, good biventricular function. There is no LSVC, no PH, and no juxtaposed of the atrial appendage. Ma'am, could you highlight the basic points of echo in case of DTGA?
So I think there are two basic points of diagnosing TGA. One is that you have pulmonary artery from aorta from LV and aorta from RV, and very importantly, both of these great arteries run parallel, which is unlike normal. If you do a normal echo, you will find only one great artery in short axis, the other will be in long axis, or vice versa. So if you get aorta in short axis, you get pulmonary artery in long axis. Here in TGA, both great arteries are running parallel. That is very, very important, because when you are diagnosing TGA, you don't know which is the vessel coming out of LV. You can always label it as aorta. You can label it as pulmonary artery. It only depends whether when you follow it and see whether it is dividing or not. So I think whenever you see both great arteries running parallel to each other in the long axis view, or in the short axis, both are seeing a circle, then that is a very, very unusual or very abnormal anatomy, and that should make you suspect that it is transposition. And then if you see more carefully, you will find that the vessel which is arising from the left ventricle is actually bifurcating very soon, and that is why you call it pulmonary artery. And the one arising from right ventricle does not bifurcate, it goes as aorta. So that is how we should diagnose transposition, because I have seen patients calling pulmonary artery. I've seen reports of echo where pulmonary artery has been labeled as aorta, and therefore TGA has been missed. The other thing is that aorta comes much more anterior. So pulmonary artery will come much before aorta, which is, so you have to really, tilt your probe more anteriorly to get aorta. Otherwise, you will only be getting pulmonary artery. And then once you get aorta, it will be on the right side, like in normal people, but it will be anterior to pulmonary artery. So that is the hallmark of diagnosing transposition of great arteries, the classical transposition of great arteries. Once you have done that diagnosis, then of course you look for associations in the form of ASD, VSD, PDA, pulmonary stenosis, or tricuspid valve abnormalities, etc., and coarctation, interruptions, etc. And then if you find that the VSD is not there or is practically not there, then you have to think about right ventricular function, right ventricular dilatation, because those who have interventricular septum tend to develop over a period of time RV dilatation and maybe RV dysfunction because of ongoing hypoxia and RV being exposed to systemic pressure for a long time. This T-shaped LV is something that we often use to give an impression that this left ventricle, is it capable of holding on after an arterial switch operation or not? That means, is it prepared for an arterial switch operation or not? So generally we say that a D-shaped LV is better than a banana-shaped LV. When the LV is totally decompressed, then it gets banana-shaped. But I think in those those shapes that we talk about are very valid for a 3-month-old or a 2-month or a 4-month-old child, where you still have hope that left ventricle will pick up after arterial switch operation. But in a 3-year-old child, I would be very worried about the left ventricle pressure. If the left ventricle pressures are low, then I know that arterial switch operation will not be a success in this patient. And therefore, I would like to know the exact pressure. Now, since you've said small perimembranous veins with ESD with bidirectional shunt, this will give an impression that right ventricle and the left ventricle pressures are equal. But on the other hand, we are saying that right ventricle is dilated, which will give an impression that right ventricle pressure is more than left ventricular pressure. So therefore, we have to be very sure whether the VSD is really bidirectional, because you are trying to get the LV pressure by echocardiography. See, you made the diagnosis of TGA, you made the diagnosis of associations as ASD, VSD, PD. Now the next is to know whether what is to be done for this patient. Should we send her for an arterial switch operation, or which is the ideal operation for such patients? For that, we need to know the LV pressure. And to know the LV pressure, there are various ways. One is looking at the shape of LV. Second is looking at the VSD jet or a PDA jet, if you have one, because that will also give you the difference or the gradient between right ventricle and left ventricle. So here there is a little bit of a discrepancy in echo finding. On one hand, we are saying small VSD with bidirectional shunt, making us feel that left ventricular pressure is same as right ventricular pressure. On the other hand, we are saying RV is dilated, which is, which means that right ventricular pressure is more than left ventricular pressure. So I think this patient needs we need to catheterize this patient to get the LV pressure to decide what should we do for such patients in terms of management.
Would you like to have any comments?
Yeah, a few more things I would add is
in the history earlier we thought there could be TR when the examination was done and the systolic murmur was there. But now looking at the mild TR on the echo, so that murmur could be due to the small VST. The smaller the VST, the longer murmur. So that could be a VST murmur rather than the TR murmur.
Only thing is that VSD is written as bidirectional shunt. So there's no gradient that is written across the VSD.
Yeah, but clinically they said the grade 3/6 murmur.
Yes, what I'm saying is that if VSD was producing the murmur, then the shunt should have been right to left only and not bidirectional.
Yeah, one more point, important point for the TGA is the continuity of the mitral valve to the pulmonary valve. Why I'm saying this is, it's very easy. We can say that because pulmonary artery is taken from the LV, we expect that the mitral valve continuity will be there to the pulmonary valve. But this finding is very important, especially when you have the VSDs of the varieties. Usually it is a perimembranous, but all other types of the varieties, even the AV canal defects type, even conoventricular varieties, multiple muscular varieties, doubly committed, and supracrustal VSDs, all those things can happen. Another important DD, closed DD, when there is a supracrustal VSD in this case, is a DORV versus a TGA. So at that time, the major determinant factor is the continuation between the mitral and the pulmonary valve, annulus continuation. So that is one important thing which has to be mentioned. And in the children, usually it is relatively the pulmonary artery of the smaller size than that of the aortic. So relative comparisons in the short axis and long axis can be considered, but not that is at the age of the 3 years. And as madam said, the D-shaped ventricle usually says that there is some pressure in the left ventricle, is not as a completely collapsed one. So that doesn't mean that the left ventricle is prepared for the arterial switch operation. It can happen in the LVOT obstruction also. There also there is, because of an obstruction, the left ventricular pressure is relatively maintained. So when this shape is maintained along with the thickness of the more than 4 mm in the end diastole and along with the LV mass to the body surface area is greater than 35, all these criteria without an LVOT obstruction, then we can consider. But the age of the 3 years, probably this D-shaped ventricle doesn't imply anything for the surgical fitness.
I agree. I think the D-shaped LV in a 2 or 3 month old will be very, very important, and one can actually go for arterial switch operation without worrying too much. But in a 3-year-old, you have to be very sure. And if there is LVOT obstruction, that is keeping the LV pressures high, even that makes this patient suitable for arterial switch operation, because we want LV to be prepared by whatever means, by a VSD or by an LVOT obstruction. as long as LV pressures are more than 2/3 of RV pressure, one can think about going ahead with an arterial switch operation. So LV is important, LV shape is important, but in a 3-year-old, it can be very, very dangerous to just go by the shape and decide the management. We need to have actual LV pressure.
Please, can you tell about how we see echo-wise juxtaposition of these atrial appendages? Because it is a frequently asked question and the students doesn't answer for that.
I thought you're going to not concentrate on the echo, but since I don't have the image to show, I think it will be very hard to show. It should be shown with the echo image and echo loops. But yes, that diagnosis can always be made very, I mean, I wouldn't say very easily, but you have to be on the lookout for juxtaposition of appendage whenever you're doing an echo in a patient with cyanotic heart, especially, because juxtaposition could be a problem. I think it's most common with the tricuspid atresia, but you need to show an echo to decide or to demonstrate how to look for a juxtaposition of appendage.
We have a few questions in the chat. Someone has asked about explain a cross heart. I'm not sure of what it is meant. Cross.
Crisscross. I think
crisscross is fine. Yeah.
Crisscross. I'm sure it means crisscross heart.
Okay.
Yeah. So crisscross heart is the heart where the atrium to ventricular connection. So it is not for ventricular arterial connection. It is for atrioventricular connection. That you see only one ventricle and left atrium seems to be going to the right ventricle. That's not actually happening. What you see is ventricle placed in such a way that you see only one connection at a time. And if you're not careful, you might even make the diagnosis of atresia of one of the AV valves. So you have to really tilt your transducer in various ways to see 2 AV valves, which you will not see in one frame like you normally see. So that is what is crisscross heart, but that's an atrioventricular issue, not a ventricular arterial issue like transposition.
ASD and a small VSD shows a small mixing of the blood. But we already demonstrated that the ASD of the larger size, 2.7 centimeters, and it is a very small perimembranous VSD. Almost we consider as an intact ventricular septum. So the mixing is acceptable.
Yes, I think it's a virtually intact ventricular septum. My only worry is that the shunt should have been right to left only and not bidirectional if the VSD is really small. But that could be, sometimes it becomes difficult because, as I said, it is right to left shunt and not left to right shunt.
There is another question on the parallel arrangement of the great arteries in echo. Is there any other conditions that can happen or only in the DTGA?
All conditions which have malposition, which have TGA, whether it is DORV, whether it is single ventricle, as long as there is TGA, I think all these conditions will have parallel direction of both great arteries. Parallel direction means the great arteries are malposed. Parallel route of aorta and pulmonary artery indicates the great arteries are malposed. That's just the great artery malposition. It has not. It may or may not be associated with ventricular arterial discordance. That's not necessary. It's the relationship between aorta and pulmonary artery which is abnormal.
That's why I mentioned about mitral pulmonary annulus continuation. That defines as a DTGA. Yeah.
Ma'am, there are lots of questions on echo, Jyotsna madam. Do you think we can have a separate session or should we go on with the discussion here? There are a lot of questions and we have not actually dealt with the echo in detail here.
I think echo can only be dealt with pictures. You cannot talk about echo without pictures.
That's true. I think we can have a separate session where we have the echo in DTGA.
I agree. Yeah.
So, ma'am, do you think the echo is sufficient for diagnosis of TGA, or you would suggest to go for a cath in the case of TGA?
I think echo is the diagnostic tool. Even if you decide to cath, the basic diagnosis has to come from echo. TGA is very easy to diagnose by echo. I think it's not, it's not a complex heart disease where echo will miss something. It's a very, very diagnostic echo. I don't think anybody should mix TGA. So diagnosing TGA and associations and complications is all possible by echo, much better by echo than by any other means. So even if there's alveolar obstruction, if there is mechanism of what is tricuspid regurgitation due to, whether the tricuspid valve is getting into the VSD, whether the interventricular septum is deviating posteriorly, all those things which the surgeon wants to know, those details are very well seen by echocardiography. You don't really need cardiac catheterization or any other investigation, not even a CT. Arch of the aorta, everything is very well seen by echo. But for managing and for deciding the management, sometimes you will have to go for cardiac catheterization to get the pressure and the vascular resistance data. In a patient where you are doubtful about operability, you will have to go for pulmonary vascular resistance calculation, which you cannot get by echo. And for patients where you are not sure of the LV pressure and you want to decide whether arterial switch should be offered or not, you will have to go for cardiac catheterization. Those are the only indications where cardiac catheterization is required. Otherwise, most, or I would say, if this patient had come at 1 month or 1.5 months of age, there was absolutely no need for a cardiac catheterization.
Absolutely. To know the PA pressure and PVRI, especially in this child at the age of 3 years, and when we have seen the plethora and this thing, we have to have the PA pressure and the PVRI.
So the indication for this will be for both this PA pressure and PVRI. Any other indication?
No, because the already discussion has came for the PVRI. In this type of the DTGA conditions, PVRI is a reliable method by the catheterization to the calculated, or what are the fallacies in the calculation of a PVR?
So I think you're absolutely right, because we always get very good PA saturation in patients of transposition compared to femoral artery saturation. Therefore, PVRI calculations is fraught with fallacies, unlike in a straightforward VSD or PDA where PVRI can be calculated very easily. But having said that, the best or the best available method for calculating PVRI is cardiac catheterization. So we do calculate PVRI by cardiac catheterization. We should understand that there are fallacies to it. Sometimes you get PA saturation which is very good, then you know that your PVRI is going to come low. But just the number of PVRI of 6, 8, and 10 that we use for straightforward VSD, PDA is not to be used over here. You have to take everything into consideration, including the cardiomegaly, including the femoral arterial saturation, and ECG, if it is showing you LV forces or not. And that is not just true for TJ, that is surgery or not, besides your clinical assessment by X-ray, ECG, clinical, and an.
Can we go to the next slide, please? So cardiac cath was done in this patient. Height of 102 centimeters, weight of 12 kgs, BMI of 13.2, hemoglobin of 18.3, body surface area of 0.6, and oxygen consumption of 155. The catheter course was through the right femoral vein, IVC, RA, into the LA, LV, and then we entered the PA. Right femoral artery to the aorta to the RV. So the pressure data is femoral artery pressure of 92/50 with a mean of 63, RA of 7, RV of 92 by 0 to 10, LV of 25 by 0 to 10, LA of 6, PA pressure of 25 by 10 with a mean of 17, pulmonary capillary wedge pressure of 4.
So first of all, I would like to say that you can catheterize a TJ child with just a venous catheter. You don't really need to do an arterial catheterization in these patients, because you can enter aorta from RV and take the pressure and take the saturation. So if you go from right femoral vein, IVC, to right atrium, and then to right ventricle, and then from right ventricle you can get into aorta. And of course, from right atrium, you can also go into left atrium through the AST into the left ventricle. And then if you want, you can get into pulmonary artery. Here in this particular case, since the LV pressure was only 25, there was really, not much need to go into pulmonary artery, because we know that the PA pressure will not be more than 25. It will be 25 or less. It cannot be more. So therefore, we know that her PA pressures are normal. So PVRI is not an issue in her, simply because her PA pressures are not elevated. If the LV pressure was 50, 60, yes, I would have made attempts to get into pulmonary artery to get the PA pressure and to get a PA saturation, because PA saturation in such cases is important for calculation of the pulmonary blood flow, QP. But in this case, since the LV pressure was only 25, you could probably leave it at that. There was no need to get into pulmonary artery. So the data shows that her pulmonary artery pressures are normal. And LV pressure is almost 1/4 of the RV pressure, which is very, very low to think about doing an arterial switch operation in this particular case. So this data is quite consistent with TGA intact ventricular septum, because the VSD, if it is there, is going to be very small, because you have a significant difference of pressure between RV and LV. The RA and LA pressures are expected to be equal because of the large ASD that you have over here, which is 7 and 6, which is not very different, just 1 millimeter difference. Coming to the saturation, you can very well see that the classical finding of a PA saturation more than FA saturation is present over here, which again makes it transposition. The FA saturation is only 67.7%, which is very low. So she is deeply blue, but she's still not Eisenmenger because her PA pressures are normal. So she's blue because of TGA, because of inadequate mixing that is happening as she's growing. She needs more mixing, but she's still not Eisenmenger. So she's operable in terms of her pulmonary vascular resistance, although we don't have it over here, but her PVR is going to be normal because her PA pressure mean is only 17 and her PA saturations are rather good, 86%. But the question is, what kind of surgery are we going to do? The RA pressure, RA and the PA, RV diastolic pressures are quite normal. Therefore, her RV dysfunction is again probably not an issue, but I would not just go by RV pressure and RV function. I would rather look at the echo, because echo is a better modality for describing RV function, or an RV angio if one has been done. I don't know if it has been done or not. If we have angios, we can have a look. But I think at least the end diastolic pressure of the right ventricle is quite normal.
And one more thing is, from the beginning you are expecting, because of the small VSD should be the right to the left shunt. This is substantiates it, because then LV pressure is so low, you should have been only right to the left shunt than a bidirectional one.
Yes, yes.
And this RA-LA pressure is suggestive of a non-restrictive ASD, large ASD?
Yeah, with 1 millimeter gradient is okay. I think RA and LA pressure 1 millimeter can still occur with large ASD because of a lot of flow that is happening across the ASD. So I would think of it as a large non-restrictive ASD. And as I said, I think I would go more by echocardiography than by angiography.
And what about the saturation data? As you said, classically the PA stats more than the FA stats.
Yes.
But that is one thing seen in TGA, but can that be seen in other conditions also?
Yes, I think wherever there is streaming happening, like even in a single ventricle, if the vessels are transposed, you're going to get exactly the same saturation, because in single ventricle also you can have the RV, RA blood going into that side of single ventricle, which is draining into the aorta. So you can still have that kind of discrepancy. So I think transposition with DORV, transposition with single ventricle, transposition itself, like this one, will have FA saturation lower than PA saturation. But classically described, this kind of a difference that you see, you know, FA being 67 and PA being 83, which is like almost 15-17% difference, will be very classical of transposition.
Ma'am, the step up regarding the SVC, IVC and RA, the step up is from IVC to RA, which is suggestive of an RA, I mean an ASD. But if it is an intact ventricle septum, how will be the saturation data here?
So you have a step up from SVC, IVC to RA. You also have a step down in LA. The pulmonary veins would be 98%, but LA is 83. So it just means that there is a bidirectional shunt that is happening. It's going both ways, right to left and left to right. That is what is expected to happen. That is, some phase of cardiac cycle will go right to left, and some phase of cardiac cycle it will go left to right. There has to be a bidirectional shunt for the circulations to mix. And therefore, you not only have a step up in RA, you also have a step down in LA. So there is a right to left as well as a left to right shunt at the ASD level.
There are a few questions in the chat. Can we tell about the RV dysfunction by RV pressure?
I said that if RV and diastolic pressure is normal, it's possible that RV function is normal, but I wouldn't vouch for it. I would rather go for an RV imaging, either by echocardiography, which is the best, or if you are going in there, you could also do an RV angio and see whether there is RV dysfunction or not.
And there is another question, why the LV sats are increased than the LA sats?
So that is something that should not have happened. You are absolutely, I mean, whoever is asking absolutely right. LA saturation should be more than or equal to LV saturation because there is no VSD. But it is possible that the saturation in LA has been taken closer to the ASD, whereas LV saturation is retaken in the apex. So if you take LA saturation closer to the pulmonary vein, you're going to get 90% because LA is a chamber which has, which is a big chamber. So it depends where you have taken the saturation.
And someone has asked about the direction of the shunt. I think we have already discussed this. We expect it to be a right to left rather than a bidirectional.
You mean across the VSD?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, if it is VSD, it should be right to left, but ASD is bidirectional.
Yes, so what are the angios you suggest here?
So if you're going in for a cath study and if your patient's stable, we can go ahead and do RV and LV angios. But here I think we want to do an angio because we want to see how big the VSD is, because the surgeon needs to know about the VSD part. So therefore we have to do an RV angio. We expect VSD to feel better from the RV side because RV pressures are higher. So we have to do an RV angio in lateral view or a steep LAO view to define the ventricular septum and to define the VSD. That will also profile aorta. So you will be able to see RV giving origin to aorta, and you can see the whole of aortic arch if you are doing it in steep LAO view. LV angio you can do in AP view or an AP cranial view, and that will define the pulmonary arteries. And the same angio in the levo phase will show you the large ASD, where you will see shunting from left atrium to right atrium in the levo phase or the late phase.
Can we go to the next slide showing the angio? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
ma'am.
Yeah, one more thing is entering into the posteriorly located pulmonary artery is not a easy procedure like a normal swan gland entering into the normal PA. Yes. So, yeah, so we require different manipulations. So we can discuss that component of it. And including
you are absolutely right. Getting into pulmonary artery from LV, see, you are going from from RA to LA to LV to pulmonary artery. You're almost making a hole of a U, and it is not easy. You are absolutely right. You have to use a wire, a Terumo wire, which floats into the pulmonary artery and then push your catheter over it. Sometimes it needs to have a multi-purpose or a right coronary catheter to get it, and that is why I was saying that if your LV pressure is 25, I wouldn't worry about it, because any manipulation in that region could give rise to blocks, heart blocks.
What about the tip direction catheters? Do you use it frequently when to enter to the pulmonary artery, or usually you don't use it?
No, we used to have now we don't use it much because they're very, very expensive. But when we were using, even then, getting into pulmonary artery in a TGA is not going to be easy with even those tip directed catheters, because from the LV you have to actually make a loop to go into the pulmonary artery. And if you have a frame, you will probably can see that it is two loops. One is LA to LV and then back from LV to pulmonary artery. So it's not easy even with the balloon catheters.
Yes, ma'am. This and the next angio actually shows that this is the catheter, the balloon catheter going from the venous side through the R8, LA, and towards the left-sided ventricle. Can you run this injection?
So I just want to add here for the students that please do not, it's difficult to say whether it is RV catheter in RV or LV, but the way catheter is going high, it's going from the RA to LA and then into LV. That tells you that you are in LV and not RV. In RV, catheter will go much lower through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. And of course, once you inject the dye, then you know it is a smooth ventricle.
Next slide, please.
So imagine even a balloon tip catheter has to take such a big loop.
Yeah, this is mainly taken to demonstrate how difficult to enter into the VA.
Yes.
And then there's a pulmonary injection to show, to confirm which vessel it was actually. Next slide.
But the previous angio was not the LV, because LV has to be banana shaped with that low pressure, and that was not LV.
I think it was LV only. LV looked quite small. We can have a look at that again, but that was LV because it was smooth ventricle and it was filling pulmonary arteries, so it has to be LV.
Yeah, actually it is LV, but filling is not good. Probably the dye is not sufficient to demonstrate in everything. We can go back and show that first slide.
So
previous slide, yeah. Yes.
One more previous.
Go back.
One more. Yes.
Yeah, run this.
So the amount of dye is quite small, but the very fact that it is filling pulmonary arteries, it has to be left ventricle and smooth also. And you can compare it with the evacuated right ventricle that we saw in the last angio. I think the amount of dye is very little.
Please go forward. Next.
I just said that classically it is a banana shape. This is not the regular shape.
In AP view, it will not appear banana shaped, Dr. Vijay. It is the LEO view which will make it more banana shaped, because here you are seeing it, you are seeing only one part of LV. So here even the size may look quite good. It is the RV impinges on the LV in the lateral view or the LEO view. So let's see the LEO view of the RV angio.
Next slide. Next slide.
So you can see that the RV is being filled from aorta. The pigtail catheter has come from aorta into RV. RV is much bigger in size. Even in the AP view, you can see RV is much bigger than LV. It is quite trabeculated. As far as function goes, it looks reasonably good function. And there is no VSD. What you are seeing in the lateral view as a jet is actually TR, because it is getting into the atrium. There is no LV filling happening. So this patient has intact ventricular septum and tricuspid regurgitation, what you are seeing in the lateral view.
Next slide, please.
So we saw good aorta filling in the RV angio also, and there was no PDA, there was no co-op. This is more like an AP view where I think you can't comment much on the PDA and co-op, but you can see the coronaries filling. Again, in a TGA, the coronaries assessment by angio can be very fallacious because they're coming from two facing sinuses. So they may appear one on top of other and give you an impression as if there is a single coronary artery, which is not the case in majority of the cases. So you can again see the coronaries very well by echocardiography.
In a newborn baby where arterial switch has to be done, there the coronary anatomy is very important. But here in this 3 years old, it may not be that.
Yeah, because she's not going to go for arterial switch anyway. Yeah,
but do you suggest an LAO for coronary?
Yes, you can do LAO for coronaries. You can do like the previous, if you see RV angio, you're actually filling the aorta, and you can do the same view for aortic root also, an LAO. But it sometimes, many a times, it gives an impression of a single coronary artery because of the two facing sinuses superimposed on each other. So you should not be carried away by the fact that it is single. You should check by echo that they're actually not single.
Actually, nowadays, with the safety of the catheters and everything, even in the very young children also, they advise we can go for a selective coronary angiogram demonstration also. But it is the first root injection will give an impression that there is an origin. Once you are certain, it is not, may not be the required. And one more thing is, in a child, as Madam was mentioning previously, a single venous access is good enough. That time we can do the laid back an angiogram. From the right side, we can enter to the aorta and inflate a balloon and inject in the dye through the proximal holes. It can fill the coronaries and demonstrate very well. That is one of the ways to demonstrate in the case of the children where we can avoid a arterial puncture to avoid the complications.
Actually, getting into aorta is much easier than getting into pulmonary artery in a TGA. So, you know, your catheter will just float into aorta, and you can keep it at the root and define the coronary arteries from there.
Next slide, please.
This laid on back angiogram, for the student's sake, it is a extreme caudal view and then balloon inflation and taking an injection. That is known as the laid back angiogram.
These views are courtesy Vijay Lakshmi ma'am, which Madam has donated to Wincast for demonstration of classical TGA. Would you like to comment on these angiograms, ma'am?
Banana shape. That's what Madam is insisting. Now the Madam can talk about the banana shape.
No, for the students, you know, just to show how it may look. That's all.
But in this angio, aorta is also filling. So this patient must be having a VSD.
Yes. Yeah. Correct.
So therefore, the LV should not actually be banana shaped. It should be good because you have a communicating VSD between the two chambers. Because very good filling of aorta also happening in this case.
Can you run both the angios? Yeah. And this qualifies as a banana shaped left ventricle?
I would not say that, because as I said, I'm seeing filling of aorta from the left ventricular injection, suggesting that there is a significant sized VSD. Therefore, aorta is filling as well as pulmonary arteries filling. If you see the angio on the left side, not this one, the left angio where you are filling pulmonary arteries and aorta both. That would mean that there is a VST. Otherwise, LV should not fill aorta in a TGA. And therefore, if there is a sizable VSD, then LV cannot be banana shaped because LV pressure is maintained in such cases, maintained as systemic, equal to RV pressure.
I think this is the end of the angio films and videos which we have. Should we come to the conclusion, and would you like to tell something about the management? Last slide, please.
So I think we are, yes, your diagnosis. I would not buy small size VST because I didn't see VST on the RV angio. Yes, it is transfusion of great arteries with a large AST with no LVOT obstruction. Increased pulmonary blood flow, no pulmonary arterial hypertension, although we don't have the PVR, but I suspect PVR has to be normal because the pulmonary artery pressures are normal. So TGA interseptum AST, that's all in the diagnosis. The issue is about management. So in a 3-year-old, I think, I don't know if you want me to discuss what management possibilities are there, Lalita?
Madam, in brief, is this sufficient or you would want to go for further imaging?
No, there's really no need for any further imaging. I think the only option left for this...
The situs has to be added, for the student.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So I think the management of this patient will be a sending oblique mustard operation because we cannot go for an arterial switch. Some people may argue for a 2-stage arterial switch operation where you band pulmonary arteries and try and prepare the left ventricle because she's 3 years old and maybe left ventricle can still be prepared. But I think conventionally such patients who have an LV pressure of almost 1/3 or 1/4 of RV pressure are best treated by a sending operation where you do atrial rerouting and not an arterial switch operation.
Jyotsna madam, any more comments or should we conclude?
We will conclude it because management, once we started, it becomes an
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. I should thank everyone. Can I request Santanu-ji to conclude the session?
I think, yes, Dr. Jyotsna, if I can just be allowed another minute. I just talked of one-line management because I think the students need to know what is the information they're looking for. Because here, the pressure in the left ventricle is the most important information that we're looking for, and why we are looking for it, that is the reason. So that is why I just wanted to make that mention.
Sure, thank you. Yes, Mr. Shantanu?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now we are towards concluding this wonderful program. I must say this, it was an exciting program which has enabled us to gain from the wisdom and this expertise of the speakers and panelists. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Lalita, Dr. Jyotsna, and finally Dr. Saxena for their great contribution in making this program possible and successful. I am thankful to all the participants who have taken time out their busy schedules and to attend this program. I thank you all for making this event a successful, and I sincerely hope your support will remain with Torrent in times to come. Thank you, goodbye and good night to all.
Thank you, Mr. Shantanu. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.